Yeah, good. Thank you, Logan. Come, Ravi. Ravi? Yes. Thank you. I can't say this consciously, of course, because at that time I didn't know what was happening. But subsequently, I think it turned my mind in a certain direction. Then the second important step was my acquaintance with Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and Swami Vivekananda. Not personally, of course, because they died probably 30 years before I was born. But when I was studying in Calcutta, I had to visit the temple at Dakshineshwar, as it is called, where Ramakrishna attained his final evolution. And on the other side of the river, the Belur Mutt, where Vivekananda used to live. And that made a profound impression on me, especially the literature, because I have read it over and over again. And it used to move me enormously, Vivekananda's literature. I have said so often that I consider him perhaps one of the very greatest personalities India has produced, equal to people like, the great rishis, you see. I would say he's a modern rishi. Then my education in Banaras, you see, that brought me into touch with the the Hindu religion. I stood for election in my hostel committee, and they have a post called the Secretary for Social and Religious Affairs, and I was elected to that post, though I knew nothing either about social or spiritualism. But it gave me an opportunity of reading up on Hinduism, performing some of these annual festivals, things like that. Then in Banaras also I had the opportunity of meeting Dr. Radhakrishnan, who was called the philosopher statesman of India. He was my vice chancellor. And my father used to know him personally, so I knew him personally too. And he used to give us every year in the winter a course of lectures on Hinduism. He was then the Oxford professor of Hindu Eastern religions and ethics or something like that. So that made a very deep impression on me. I think it was soon after that I started reading the Gita and got deeper and deeper into this. So all this was sort of preparation for my meeting with Babuji, let us say. Unconscious preparation, perhaps, untergrund preparation as you call it. And in school, which I forgot to mention, I had to study Christianity. It was compulsory and we had to pass an examination. Otherwise, I could not write my final exams. So I studied the Gospel of St. Marg very thoroughly, and I'm happy to say that I topped in my class in Christian tradition. I had to attend church. So you see, several influences, I think, came into my life, though each one by itself did not seem significant. Now when I look back, I see the significance of all these things. Of course, in Sahaj Marg terms, the samskaras must have been good to push me initially in this direction, because it is the samskara which creates these opportunities. Now it was up to me to make use of the opportunity or not. So when all these influences finished and I was in Bombay after finishing my education, I started doing yogasanas, pranayama by myself. I had no guidance. At no stage had I any guidance. And I did that for several years. But I think The pranayama thing made a mess of me because I developed fear, I developed so many things which were not desirable. Then finally, I think it was in 1958 or 59, I was transferred to Madras. Here I became a serious practitioner of the Hindu religion in the sense that I started dressing like a Brahmin, which I am by birth, putting on these things in the forehead and got Vedic instruction. I had teachers at home teaching me the Vedas, reciting it every day. You can call it the practice of the orthodox Brahmanism. That went on for, I think, several years, 3, 4 years, 5 years. And this house, we used to have Vedic chants practically every month, for 5 days continuously. And the house used to vibrate with the Vedic mantras. And at that time, we met one person who was a homeopathic doctor. And he told us about Babaji Maharaj. And my father and I just went and sat in satsang one day here. There were only 3 others, and we too became the 4th and the 5th. So, it is a funny thing, but I never had what you call the traditional first sittings. There was no first sitting or second sitting or third sitting, things like that. Then, of course, several months later, you will find all this in my master, this part of it. The book, my master. Several months later, I went to Shahjahanpur, and unlike what people would expect, my first meeting with my master was a total shock, a negative shock. I wasn't at all impressed with him. Because, traditionally we are used to thinking of a spiritual giant as a spiritual giant. So we combine in our mind the idea of spirituality and a giant in physical form. Some like one of your Gothic gods, for instance, or the Vikings, big, strong fellows, also rishis combined. But here was a man who was, a tiny fellow whom I could have just lifted with my little finger. He hardly weighed 40 kilos. And I used to weigh in those days 92 kilos. So I was a hefty fellow. Nor could he speak well. He was not very, precise when he spoke. He was not even vocal to that extent. He could not speak much, and he was shy of people. He was shy of strangers. Even in Hindi, his Hindi was a mixture of Urdu and Hindi. So it was a big melange, as you can say. So the first visit was very definitely a shock. And if I had the ability, I would have run away from there, and I would have lost my whole spiritual life. You see how by a spider's thread, as it is, one's future hangs. If I had made the mistake of getting into my car and going away, I would have been a nice executive, very successful, probably very rich, probably with a lot of bad habits, drinking, etc., and perhaps happier than I am now. But certainly not better than I am now. I would have been a very happy man. I would have been very successful, I would still be working, consultancy, this, that, and the other. So that first visit, a shock, I think was a necessary shock. Because had he been all that I expected him to be, I would have been very complacent. It would have been something which matched my expectation. But the very fact that he was totally opposite to what I expected, physically, mentally, everything. And his house was a disaster. A tumbled down, old, rickety place, full of dust, filth, flies, mosquitoes by night. I don't know how I stood that for 2 days. But those 2 days made me, because it brought me to a sense of reality. See, that a saint need not be a big, strong fellow, that a saint need not be educated, that a saint need not live in a palace, that a saint's house even need not be clean, in our sense, that everything is spick and span, polished, So, this reality came into my, shall we say, vision. I'm not talking of some supernatural vision, but the purely human vision. And that was the first training, it's like swimming, you jump into the water and scold. But it wakens you up. And when you are awake, now you are more capable of swimming across. Otherwise, if it is just your body temperature, you are lazy, you are indolent. So in that sense, that first shock was, I think, the best training I received from him. Then, of course, I sort of fell in love with the old man, and the rest is everywhere.
Thank you. Inside Marg always again comes different words, and they come again and again, like surrender. And my question now is, in one of Babaji's books I read, surrender means total passivity, total passivity. How is this surrender, this total passivity, to integrate in our active and intellectual life? Where's the goal between what we really do and what comes from the master?
Yes, passivity does not really mean physical passivity. We don't sit down like a statue, and that is not surrender in any case. That is idleness. Passivity here means not being active in a sense in which you want to be active. Whether physically or mentally, it does not matter. You want to go for a walk. Surrender says, why do you want to go for a walk? Because you are attached to your body, you are attached to your health, you are attached to your physical proportions, you are attached to your beauty, etc., etc. No, they are not yours. When you realize they are not yours, but they really belong to the master, you are passive. If he says, go and take a walk, you go and take a walk. If he says, lie down, you lie down. So surrender means, I should say, impassivity. You say a person is impassive. That means he does not react at all. Now we are reacting to everything. We are reacting to our desires, we are reacting to our needs, we are reacting to our higher aspirations, if we have any. So there's a sort of a pull in three directions. So what happens, in mathematics, when there are pulls from different directions, the body remains there if the pulls are equal. There's no progress in any direction. If one is stronger, well, there's a slight progress towards that direction. No, these are all on one plane. The physical, the existential plane. No, we have to go this way. So what happens? These pulls must go, and then this weakest of forces. See, yesterday we were discussing that gravity is called the weak force, and yet it holds the universe together. Whereas the thing which binds the molecules and the atoms together is called the strong force, and it's gone. It has no more strength. Its strength is over distances which are called, quantum distances, like 10 to the power of -6 of a centimeter or a millimeter. No distance at all, physically speaking. But it is a strong force within those distances only. But this weak force is holding an enormous universe which you think of in terms of 20 billion light years in diameter. And this weak force is holding it. No, the weaker or weakest force is with the spiritual force, the pull from above, which lasts life after life. If you don't obey it this life, you have to obey it the next life. Or the next, or the next. Spirituality does not bother, about your life. Because as Babaji used to say, if they don't come now, they will come in next life or after 4 lives, but they have to come. Why? Because that powerful force is there. It is the weakest, but it is the most powerful. This is the antithesis in spirituality, that opposites meet. A weak man is the strongest individual in the universe. The unlettered man is the wisest in the universe. How to reconcile these? So we have to accept that we too have to become like that. No, you are a woman. You have to forget your femaleness. I am strong. I have to forget my strength. Somebody is weak, he has to forget his weakness. We have to forget whatever we are. So, the beauty of this is, by forgetting ourselves, we remember him. Or as Babuji says, remember him and you forget everything else. No, this remembrance focuses your attention, concentration, devotion, everything on that one point. Now you are responsible only to that, which means automatically you are passive to everything else. So we don't surrender in that sense. Surrender happens. When everything else is focused towards this one point, surrender happens by itself.
Very often it's very difficult to integrate in relationships with other people who don't meditate or what is it? People have constantly.
Yes, but it is like a ship which is sailing and the compass is always pointing north. No, you may say east or west or north or south, but the compass must always point north. If the compass starts going with you, you are lost. So you have to keep your bearings wherever you may be, whatever you may be, with whomever you may be. Then there's no problem.
Cool. So, is it possible to feel spirit?
Is it possible to feel?
To feel, really to feel.
Yes, of course. Certainly, I feel it all the time.
Yes, because very often he says many of the abhyasis are not really able to feel.
No, I was talking, that is not the feeling I'm talking about now. That is a discussion between feelings and emotions.
So what's the difference?
Well, the feelings and emotions refer to the human feelings and emotions. Like I feel sad. If I really feel sad, I don't have to be emotional about it. But when I don't feel sad, I'm emotional. I start weeping. It's more for show. Maybe unconscious, may not be intentional, but nevertheless it is showmanship. So when we don't have real feelings, we have emotions. I think, or I have often said, that emotion is like smoke, feelings are like fire. When the fire is burning well, there's no smoke.
But how can we realize whether it's a feeling or emotion? What is it? How?
When you don't have emotion, but you still feel something for the other fellow, that is feeling.
It's feeling.
Yes. Now you find in the world only emotion, you see. People weeping when they park, but they are on the plane and they're taking chocolate and ice cream. In feeling, such things cannot happen. If you really feel, suppose, God forbid, somebody dies, whom you love very much. You cannot be eating ice cream and chocolates. At least you won't go for them. If somebody gives you may still eat, you say, out of politeness. But your heart will reject. You say, what is this, chocolate now? Mama mia, it is not possible to eat chocolate now. Because that is a thing which you take for a different feeling altogether. Feeling of love, of joy, you see. So this is the problem. We are satisfied with emotions because emotions are overt, expressible outside, which other people can see and appreciate. And they will say, oh, what a lovely darling she is, she has so much feeling for the poor. For instance, there are people who are working with lepers, with beggars. And commonly I hear people saying, oh, she has so much feeling for the poor. Nonsense. I think it is a vocation for them. They start working like a nurse in a hospital. What feeling has she for the sick people? She is doing her job. She comes and pats you. No, Sherry, don't worry. Everything is going to be all right. False smile. And she in the next bed, she is saying the same thing. The next bed, she is saying the same thing. Somebody is dead. They pull the sheet over the face and she makes a mark on her register, you see. 1123, died. And the doctor comes. You whisk back the sheet. And he is examining and he says, yes, it's finished, you see. And there's no emotion left. You call the ward boys and say, take him to the mortuary. Where is the feeling?
But how can I realize this?
Yes, but you know it in your heart.
Yes.
Each one has to know it in your heart.
Good.
Yes.
Would you tell us something about spiritual liberation?
Spiritual liberation?
Yes.
There's no such thing as spiritual liberation. There's only liberation.
Liberation?
Yes.
Sorry, okay, liberation.
You see, there is freedom. Freedom applies to this world. The freedom to work, to act as you like, to do what you want, to live as you please. This is called the temporal freedom. A man goes to jail and comes out, he is said to be free. He may not be really free. He is only free from prison. Now the outside world may be a bigger prison for him. He doesn't know where to go. He cannot get a job. His wife has divorced him and married somebody else. His children hate him because he's coming out of jail. His friends don't want to see him. No, which is freedom. But you say this is freedom. This man is free. So what is freedom? It doesn't exist. All right, you have a car. No, are you not a slave of that car? Don't you worry when it is not working properly. Suppose it is damaged in an accident. Don't you lose your sleep? How could this happen, you say? Why not? So you are a slave of your car, you are a slave of your husband, you are a slave of your lover, you are a slave of your job, you are a slave of economics, politics, socialistic things. So what is freedom? Now when we are able to forget all this, and go in the only way where freedom is possible, we call that liberation. That is why Babuji said, freedom from freedom is real freedom.
So, and is this liberation the highest goal?
No, it is only the lowest of spiritual possibilities. Because after liberation, we have realization, and after realization, we have the possibility of merging with the source or the guru, you see. That is becoming one with him. Now, this, you see, this is a funny thing. People are afraid of this merger. They think of a cup of water put into the ocean, about which Hinduism talks. And they say, but what happens to the water? But the water is there. Isn't it? What happens to my breath when I breathe it out? It is there. It has not gone anywhere. So why are we afraid? So we should not be afraid. But we are afraid that we lose our identity. We are annihilated, we say. Extinct. It's wrong. Because there are liberated people, there are people who have achieved Laya, as we call it in Sanskrit, who are still living here and working here, retaining their identities. No, whether I want to retain my identity or not depends on me. No, when I choose to let go of this identity, I shall be what you will call in worldly terms dead. So as long as the life is there, the identity is remaining with me. It is like your passport. As long as you are a German citizen, you have a German passport. Suppose you give up this and become an Australian. You have an Australian passport. Your identity is changed. But you have not changed. No? So here also, till the merger, the eternal self remains identical. It retains its identity. Only, when you have no liberation and you have to be reborn, there is a forgetfulness of the identity, because that remembrance of what you were does not help in becoming what you have to become. So the memory of the past is removed. That is, past identities are gone. Like suppose you become an Australian citizen, you will still speak German. No. But your passport has changed, your country has changed, your residence has changed, your job has changed. Maybe you will marry an Australian. But the essential you is still there. This is in this life. But when you take rebirth, suppose you are born in Timbuktu, you will not remember you are a German and an Australian afterwards. All that is gone, because it is no more useful in that life to have these memories. Like working on a computer. You are doing, let us say, spreadsheet work. It is finished. You change directories and get into something else. So I would say that the course of our lives is different directories and different files in those directories which we operate. Sometimes the whole file is erased. That is when death comes between two lives. It is erased because it's no more useful. He remembers, but we don't. It is like erasing in the computer, in a sense in which I cannot see it, but the computer still has it. Not accessible to me. But what happens if I am able to become that spiritual personality who can now remember everything without being troubled by those memories, or without being affected by those memories, or being tempted by those memories? Then all memory is open to me again. So you see, we forget so that our purpose in life should be achieved. And if that purpose is achieved, all memory, that is why Krishna says in the Gita, I remember everything from long ago to the future. Nothing is hidden from me. Why? Because for him it has no effect. Now suppose you have a man who has been married 17 times in 17 different lives, and he remembers all of them. And if unfortunately he recognizes them in this life, what will he do? Which children will be his children? Which wife will be his wife? He will be pulled here and there. So until we are strong enough to resist the temptations of memory, memory is forbidden to us. When we become strong enough, you see, it's like a child. It has an ice cream yesterday, it wants an ice cream today. It will create tantrums, it will weep. It has no possibility of overcoming its memories of yesterday. But we have. So we can eat ice cream with impunity, because tomorrow if I even remember it, I am not going to worry about it. It's not going to pull me and affect me. You can see the parallel in this life itself. Isn't it?
Is there any problem or any difficulty to organize this whole thing on a material, on a human level?
No, except the problems of the ego of the individuals. When people cooperate, it's very easy. You see, I have often wondered how a man who runs his family would run, for instance, the government of a country. And I find that it is only a matter of scale. See, so long as you are able to say spend 1,000 marks on your family and do it in a just way, apportioning the money according to the needs, respective needs, the same principle applies in government. So what is so wonderful about running a state, for instance? The man at the head must be sensible, must be fair, must be just. That is all that's necessary.
But with more people, there are also more difficulties coming into the mission.
Well, you see, growth has to be planned for. What mistake we often commit is we try to tackle growth after growth has happened. It is like allowing a child to grow and suddenly one day you find that its clothes are too small. Then you rush out to the shops and buy some clothes. A sensible mother would make it a little bigger so that the child grows into it, and by the time it is getting a little tight, she is ready with the next set of clothes. So when growth is planned for, which means that we have all the systems ready to accept the responsibility of bigger groups everywhere, there is no problem.
It means there's also a spiritual background behind the whole process of growth.
Well, it is the spiritual background which makes the growth possible, because the thing doesn't grow by itself. In a sense, you can say the master is planning for development of the human societies all over the world, and therefore he is sending transmission all over the world all the time, with the intention that those who are already prepared for it should receive the transmission and come towards him or towards the mission. And this is what is steadily adding to numbers. Of course, this work is supported by preceptors if they are sensible and dedicated to their work.
Can you say something about this work with the preceptors, how this is organized?
Well, the preceptors are supposed to do the spiritual work on behalf of the master wherever they may be. They are supposed to essentially do the cleaning of the abhyasis and not worry about spiritual elevation of the abhyasis. That is not their job at all. In fact, Babuji Maharaj used to say they cannot do it. He was very categorical about this, that preceptors cannot elevate abhyasis. But they can prepare them for elevation, which the master then just, with just one touch of his spiritual, shall we say, effort.
Some days back, there was another ashram coming in Denmark. How do you finance these projects?
Well, that's an interesting question, because at the moment we don't have enough money except to pay the advance that they want, which amounts to about, I think, a very small fraction of the total price. What we are trying to do is, as soon as the negotiations are concluded and the price is fixed, we are trying to divert all donations from all the countries in Europe towards this new ashram fund. So, essentially, we should be able to raise, by the end of September, say 75% of the purchase price. For the balance, we have to negotiate with the seller to give us some time, maybe paying a little interest on it. That should be possible. I mean, we should be able to pay the balance of 20-25%, hopefully in a year to 18 months, from donations.
Yes, in general, you don't.
Mission has no capital fund as such. We always work with donations. Donations sustain the mission's activities.
Is it
The
enough?
only other source of revenue is the sales of books, but then they are very expensive to produce, and the profit margin is really not important, because we are not selling books for profit. And as you know, the mission does not charge any membership fees.
For me, the question is also like how you can integrate the spiritual and the organizational aspects, whether there is any gap or whether it is interlinked very closely.
I don't know, my master desired that it should be like that. He felt that spiritual work is the more important, and the organizational work the not so important aspect of the mission, which is true. Because what are we really doing? We are collecting some donations and administering the available funds to the best advantage of the abhyasis. So, what our preceptors need, especially those who are in charge of centers, is a basic willingness to learn some new talents, like, say, handling money, accounting for money, maintaining records, which is, I think, a very easy and simple thing if they are willing to apply themselves to it. And the same goes for the president of the mission. If everybody else cooperates, his work becomes easy. If they don't, his work becomes difficult.
Apropos President, sometime back you were announcing that you wouldn't want to be called anymore a master. Is it because in the West this concept of master is misunderstood, or what are the reasons? What is the background?
Well, I don't feel that I should be called like that. That's all. It has nothing to do with any concepts or misconceptions. It is just that I don't like to be addressed like that.
The last thing which interests me, you say a couple of times you said you don't have much time left for your work.
Yes, you see, when we are working, we always feel we have more and more work. The funny thing in spiritual work is as you complete the work or you think you are completing, more work comes. It's like a journey. You are going towards your destination and yet you have more miles to cover. So that sense of urgency is a good thing, I think. It makes people apply themselves with more and more dedication and integrity. Whereas if a man feels he has all the time in the world, he is going to be lazy and a no good fellow. So in that sense, that is one way of looking at it.
There are no
The
catastrophes.
other thing is that I am really getting old. I will be completing 65 years of age in another 2 months, and that's by no means young, you see. In India at 65, we think we are already living on borrowed time and that we have taken 15 years more than we should have had. In this country, life expectation has always been low. So 65 is an enormous age, as old as Methuselah.
We think we have you for some more time here.
I beg your pardon?
We all think we have you for some more time
Well,
here.
that is what my master will say. I don't know. When he thinks I've had enough, because the work is never going to end. It's not a question of my work being finished and I'm being recalled. It's a question of when he thinks I've suffered enough and he will say, okay, it's enough. No, let the next follow time.
But there is no external reason why there's some external thing going to happen where you don't have any time. There are no catastrophes coming up.
No, it's not like that. I mean, catastrophes are normal and they affect everybody. What is a catastrophe? Something which is unexpected, sudden. Yeah. So anything can happen to anybody. If a man dies of heart attack, we don't think of it as a catastrophe, just because it's natural. So there's no catastrophes involved. But I think, you see, we must always be prepared. As Babuji said, wisdom is to live as if you're going to die the next moment. So when I say I have little time left, I hope I'm being at least a little wise. Thank you very much.
Master, there are thousands of people coming to seek help with you. What is it that brings them to your doorstep?
I think basically it's a human need for help in situations they cannot handle. I don't think initially they come for spiritual help, but they come for human help, for human sympathy, for human love. And if they find it, I think they stay. If they don't find it, they probably leave.
What is this thing, spirituality? We were mostly raised in a religious background, but what is the difference to spirituality?
My master has said that where religion ends, spirituality begins. Now, religions are sort of social phenomena. You see, each religion has a specific historical background. It was born in a particular epoch. Different saints have appeared at different times in different parts of the world, and they have created these. I won't say they created the religions, but the teaching that they gave has become hardened into a religion. For instance, a man called Jesus, he taught something. Later on, that became Christianity. Similarly, a man called, Siddhartha, was born in a princely family. He was protected from all outside influences and lived in the palace. He married a beautiful princess, had a baby. One day he went out of the palace with his servant, and then he saw a dead man being carried to the cremation. He saw a sick man, he saw an old man, and it shocked him because he was not open to reality that there are these things. Because in his palace he was surrounded only by beauty and youth. So he said, what is the value of this life if I'm going to be sick like this man, old like this man, and dead like that man? So he started meditating. And he became a saint, and he taught, and his teachings became Buddhism. Similarly with Muhammad, the prophet of Islam. See? Therefore, I have always said that Christ was not a Christian, Buddha was not a Buddhist. All religions preach that there can be only one God. But each religion says the God of that religion is the only God and the true God. Therefore, they have tried to convert people to their religion. There has been bloodshed. There has been the wars of the Saracens, for instance. There have been the wars between the Jews and the Christians. Whereas Christ himself was a Jew. He was a born Jew. So you see, a religion divides because a religion has a particular God with a particular name, though they claim he is infinite and the ultimate. In spirituality, we have no God with a name, no God with a form, no God with attributes. It is an abstraction, the abstraction of the ultimate potential to which a human being can rise. This we call spirituality.
And in which way can you serve humanity with that spirituality? You also need a kind of an organization. So you have your system called Sahaj, Marg.
Well, an organization is not a religion. A religion is something which is organized with doctrine and theology, etc., as foundations. And there is this implicit understanding that you cannot move out of the boundaries of a religion. So they are organizations which, in a sense, impose slavery upon the individual. They rob him of his freedom. They rob him of his freedom to think. They rob him of his freedom to worship. In spirituality, on the contrary, we are trying to liberate people. Liberation means liberating you from the bondages to which you are now subject. And these bondages are of the faith and of the intellect. When you are condemned to thinking in a particular line of philosophy or a particular line of speculative thought, you are a slave of that system. Here we are able to think not through the use of our own intellect, but by using the master of the spiritual path who thinks for us. So we enjoy the freedom that he has. He does for us the research into what we call the ultimate reality, and he places it at our disposal, and we are free to do it in the same way as he is doing it. We meditate. We have no temples, we have no mosques, we have no churches. Therefore, we are not slaves of places of worship. We have no God by name, the Buddhist God, the Christian God, or the Muslim God. Therefore, we are not bound to worship a particular God. We are not worshipping God at all in a real sense because we are only trying to move towards that ultimate reality which alone will give the true bliss and the true freedom. Spirituality says all this is embodied in the heart of the human being par excellence. Spirituality says this presence is there in everything in creation, whether it is a cow or a snake or even a bit of stone. What makes the difference is the level of consciousness that that particular thing enjoys. A stone has no consciousness. An insect has a minimal consciousness. A cow has a great deal more consciousness. A horse is supposed to have highly developed consciousness. But we are supposed to be, as human beings, capable of a consciousness which can be divine. Therefore, we talk of divinization of the human being as the goal of spirituality. Divinization meaning that our consciousness becomes so expanded, the presence in our heart becomes so expanded that it fills the universe. So, by allowing the self inside to expand to its proper, shall we say, dimension, which is a dimensionless dimension, we, in a sense, become like our Creator. We cannot become gods. That is crazy, you see. But we can become God-like. So the goal of spirituality is not to worship a god to get some presents or gifts or freedom from disease and sickness, but to become like him. So this is a big difference.
Well, the concept of master, at least in the West, is very unknown to most of the people. We know it in crafts and arts, but how is it you can teach people? What can you do for them, being a master, being a guru to them?
I think it's wrong to say that the concept of master is not known in the West, because after all, Christ was called master by his disciples, and that is 2000 years old, you see. And there must have been a tradition of calling the master as master even before Christ. You don't suddenly start calling somebody master by discovering a word in your vocabulary. So the practice of calling your spiritual guide as master must have been there even long before Christ, thousands of years before Christ. Here in India, we believe that concept of the master as the master of the soul has been there ever since human beings appeared. Now, when you think of the master in the West, you think of a master in relation to, say, a servant or a slave. So, in a sense, in the Occidental mind, this idea of master is repugnant, because you immediately feel that you are becoming enslaved by somebody, or becoming subordinate to somebody, or becoming subjugated to somebody. In the East, he is the master of the soul, not of the body. Of course, because the soul is in the body goes with the soul. So you cannot send your soul to your master and leave your body behind, for instance, in Munich. Is it possible? It's not possible. So in that sense, we also have the mastery, in some sense, over the total person. Because suppose you are able to drive a car, you are controlling the source of the car, the source of the power in the car, which is the engine. So when you have the ability to regulate that engine, its speed, its number of revolutions, you are also able to have regulatory control over the mechanism in which it is embedded, which is the total automobile. No, if the engine was not there, the car is useless, even if it's a BMW, for instance. It may be beautiful, it may be expensive, but what would you do without an engine? So a driver must know how to control the engine of the car, its power, its capacity to move the automobile. Therefore, you have the steering wheel, the brakes, the transmission, and all these things. So similarly, here also we try to help the Abhyasi to gain the ability to regulate his own conduct and behavior by acquiring this regulatory capacity over his heart. We do not believe that the intellect is the culprit. The intellect is the culprit in one sense, that the intellect alone can think of crooked things to do or good things to do. It does not know the moral distinction between right and wrong. The intellect has no moral jurisdiction, as we say. If you ask the intellect what is the quickest way of making money, if the program has been properly made, it will say rob a bank. How to rob a bank? The intellect will give you the right plans. So the intellect has no moral judgment capacity. Now, real life, the way in which a person leads his life, really depends therefore on the heart. Now, in the West, this is unknown. Therefore, your Western philosophies are only philosophies of the intellect. They don't really help you to lead a good life or even to live life rightly. Therefore, you have great philosophers, but you don't have a living philosophy. You have only philosophers in books. You can read Plato, you can read Aristotle, you can read, your German philosophers like Schopenhauer. But how do they help you to live? Spirituality is a living, perennial philosophy. It helps you, especially Sahaj Marg, because the master of the system is able to train you in how to meditate upon your heart. Through meditation upon the heart, we believe we establish a contact between our own outer self and our own inner self. Now, in normal living, the two have no connection at all. It is like a divorced couple. They don't even look at each other. They don't smile at each other. Sometimes they don't even see other. So the normal human being today of modern civilization is a being who has two selves who are divorced. Therefore, you have psychological phenomena like, for instance, schizophrenia. where there is the divided self. There can be multiplicity of divided selves, because each desire you can treat as a certain self manifesting in yourself. Now, by meditating on the heart and by relegating the intellect to its, shall we say, rightful position in life as something which can give me guidance on how to do things, but not why to do things. The how comes from the brain, the why or why not comes from the heart. So, we are trying to reunite this divorced couple and to hand the control of the living person back to the heart, which after all can alone exercise control over the person's life in saying this must be done, this must not be done. When the inner person wants to know how to do it, he will refer to the heart, to the head, to the intellect, very much like I refer to my computer. Now the computer is an instrument for me, it is not my master. But in Occidental philosophies, in Occidental ways of life, we have come to depend only on the intellect, and we pride ourselves on the intellect. We think that is all. And therefore, when the intellect says, do this, do destroy that, subjugate these people, don't give way, destroy 100 tons of cheese to keep up the prices. And when an Easterner tells you it is immoral, you say, how can it be immoral? Because you are dealing now with the laws of economics, supply and demand, that if there's too much of a commodity, the price will fall. Okay, economics says it is right, but does morality say it is right? Now you have to refer to the heart. Therefore, you see, spirituality is a reawakening of one's consciousness to the existence of an inner self, a regulatory self, a governor, if you like to call him, who must decide what is to be done. When the what is to be done is correct, the how it is to be done is a minor detail. In the West, how is it to be done has become the major detail. What is to be done is of no consequence now. How shall we destroy an enemy? Fire him. Rain missiles upon him. Have you asked the question why this enemy should be destroyed? Is he an enemy at all? They don't ask these questions because they feel threatened, they attack. No, that is the reaction of an animal, you see. So my master said, the way of progress is from the animal human being to the normal human being to the divinized human being.
There are two questions now that arise for me. The first is, how did the separation come about in the first place? And what is it that you can do as a master today? Because you have thousands and thousands of followers all over the world.
Well, I personally think that Greek philosophy is the culprit as far as the Occident is concerned. Because with the Greek philosophers came the importance of the intellect, the importance of reason, as against the importance of the emotions, the feelings, the importance of love in life. So I trace this malady of the Occident to the Greeks. Now, in the Oriental countries, this mistake has not happened. Of course, the Europeans will say, but look at your intellect. I dare to say that we have some of the best intellects ever in the history of human beings. Not only today, throughout history. It is a fact of history that our countries were very civilized, very cultured, advanced to the extent necessary, thousands of years before Europe was even populated. Western societies are by and large recent in origin as compared to, say, our Oriental societies. We count our culture back to 10,000 years, 15,000 years back in civilization. You cannot count back more than, 700 years, 1,000 years, 2,000 years. So you see, there is always this problem that intellectual advancement naturally is proud of intellect and intellectual advancement. So your societies have been trained or conditioned to think of intellectual advancement alone as some sort of a godly advancement. Now that intellectual advancement produced, shall we say, a good society, industrial revolution, whatnot. So now you think a good life means an opulent life, a life of excess, too much to eat, too many comforts at home. Now the more your mind goes towards these things, the more your mind is also going away from the true life. The true life must be a life in touch with nature. Windows must be open, at least once a day. There must be some cold against which you must resist. You must be able to bathe in cold water, even in snow. You see, human being must be strong, but I find the Western people are becoming weaker and weaker, though they are healthy. They come to India, they drink a glass of water and they have diarrhea. Why? Because the immunity, natural immunity of the system has been destroyed by only drinking totally purified water. So the moment you are exposed to some dust, some heat, kaput. I'm really ashamed of my Western brothers and sisters because they have the highest standards of living, they have the highest consumption of the best goods of this world, they have the highest energy consumption, they have the greatest level of comfort ever enjoyed by human beings, and yet at the slightest exposure, I repeat, kaput. So what is the use of such a civilization? Therefore, they are more dependent on their arms, on their ammunition, on their wars. Now, we believe in India that if a man is a true man, you see, he doesn't need a gun. And if that man can be divinized so that he has the source inside himself, what we call divinity itself in his heart, then why does he need weapons? No, if you go back to your European mythologies, you find this in stories like David and Goliath, for instance. You find it in the temptation of Christ. You find it in the temptation of Buddha, the ultimate temptation on the 40th day of their meditation. And they come out successful because they have trained themselves to resist. Resist means to have the strength to overcome that which is attracting you, that which is based on your samskaras. No, if you don't develop these tendencies, you are a slave of your tendencies. So your victories are external. The spiritual victories are internal. Your victories are against others. Our victories are against ourselves. So you see the difference.
Well, that's why we have to come to India. Is there nothing that we can find in our place which is comparatively strong and fulfilling? Is it really necessary to come to India?
Well, if you want diamonds, you've got to go to the Kimberley mines in South Africa, you see. You have to go where it is available. No, certain things are naturally available only in some places, like gold and diamonds in South Africa. This beautiful green jewel, what do you call it? Sapphire in, I don't know, Malaysia. Petrol, oil in the Middle East. Spirituality seems to be here in India, you see. More than, I don't know, it is perhaps a distribution in the original creator's mind. See, like your eyes see. Why should your nose not see? Because the creator designed it like that. Why should the engine of the car be under the bonnet or not on the roof? Because the designer did it like that. I mean, someday we may have a car in which we are sitting at the bottom and you have wheels from a crane like this on all sides and it is suspended, you see. It will be crazy. So design says simplicity. Now, if there was water everywhere, spread thinly over the surface of the earth, how will you drink? So you have wells. So nature creates, this is my way of thinking, I don't know if it is true or not, but this is how I think. Nature creates concentrations of certain good things of life in certain places. And you must find it there. You cannot find everything everywhere. So the wise man looks for what he wants, knowing where to find it, and goes there and accepts it. No, India is not something foreign to, shall we say, Europe. You think you are going to India because your political world of today has been split up into countries artificially by local governments. And they have been surrounded by high-powered barriers and fences and political, I don't know what, to keep people out. People who are in cannot go out, people who are out cannot come in. No, these are prisons created by the human intelligence, a misguided, devilish intelligence, I would call it. Now, suppose there are no names to any countries. Where is India? It is like in my own house. If I want to eat, I go to my kitchen. If I want to have a shower, I go to the bathroom. Oh, but Chari, why should I go to the bathroom to have a shower? Can I not have it right here? So we should look upon this world as a house in which there is a room for wealth, there is a room for health, there is a room for education, there is a room for spirituality. So all that you are doing is going from one room of that, shall we say, global house to another room in the global house. Like today we go to America for education. We go to Germany for technology. We go to India for spirituality. Why not? Have you ever asked the question, why should people come to Germany for technology? Because you are a German, you have it in Germany, you are proud of it. But in spirituality, there is nothing to be proud of because I cannot see it, I cannot touch it, I cannot sell it. So it is something intangible, you see, yet something which can be felt. No, without a rose, you cannot smell the perfume of the rose. So if you want the natural perfume of the rose, you must go where the rose is. Because if you cut it and bring it away with you, the perfume lasts for a few seconds and then it is only dead petals to be thrown away. So we have to go, if you want the real thing, not some bottled stupid essence, if you want the real thing, you have to go where it is existing naturally, fresh always. Therefore, you have to go to wherever it is. And in this case, it happens to be India.
And therefore, we also need a living master. But still, for that second part of the question, how is it that the work can be done even for thousands or millions of people in the same way?
That really depends upon the capacity of the master, you see. Not in every system can you help 1,000 people at the same time. For instance, I can only feed 5 people at home or 10 people or maybe 100. I cannot feed 1,000. That is because of limitations of space, limitations of money. If I were a king, I could feed the whole nation. So here you have to be a king of spirituality. You are an emperor of spirituality to be able to help everybody at the same time. So that is why my master said, look for such a master who has this capacity. It is not that spirituality can help everybody at the same time. It is that a particular system of spirituality with a particular master can do it. Otherwise, we have in the Hindu tradition 3 types of gurus. The guru, like for instance, the tortoise, as they say, the fish and the hen. The hen must lay its egg and sit on it to hatch it. So it needs physical contact. Similarly, we have gurus who must initiate you by touching your head and muttering some mantras. Without that, there is no initiation. The second level or the second higher level of gurus is the fish, which lays its eggs in the water and swims round and round, keeping only visual contact. That is a higher level. So, but they have to see the disciples at least, though they may not touch them. The third we say is like the tortoise, you see, the shilkot, which puts its eggs on the sand, covers it up and goes away and just keeps mental contact with it. So that level of guru, the shilkot type, is the highest level of guru, and you have to find such. All are existing at all times. Now in Christianity perhaps you have the type of gurus like the hen, you see, where you need a monastery, where the lay person gets into the monastery, he is in contact with the bishop or the abbot, he is trained physically, water is put on his head, the hands of the priest are laid on his head, and he becomes a priest. So you see, the lowest can be available everywhere. The highest cannot be available everywhere. For instance, you can find only one Mont Blanc. The Swiss Alps can extend even into Germany. But the highest peak is only in one place, and it's generally a point, you see. So that we have to locate.
So is it you mainly working through mental contact, or is it a spiritual essence, or how could you describe the work practically?
Which work? Well, my work is the work of my master, you see. We believe we have the ability to transmit the spiritual wealth of the Guru, and that transmission works without limitations of space and time. So the Abhyasi can be anywhere, he can be in outer space for all we care, it doesn't matter. And the Guru does not have to know where he is. For instance, when I send a telegram to you to Munich, I don't have to know where you are, but you will get it. So many things nowadays, due to modern technology, we are able to send without knowing where a thing is. For instance, in warfare, you have missiles which are no longer aimed at an object like it used to be before. You just send, for instance, a heat-seeking missile. And because it is created to seek out the heat of something, it goes straight to the engine of, say, an aircraft and destroys the aircraft wherever it is flying. Now, if this can be created by human beings using metal and gunpowder or whatever it is, why can't a human being send his thought searching for his object of search? It's very easy. After all, it is with the mind we create all material things. So the highest source of power is in the mind. But we don't use the mind anymore, we use machines progressively. So there is this divorce between not only the heart and the head, but there's the divorce between the head and its work. More and more we are, even you can see children operating calculators to say add 12 and 12 to make 24. So we are getting more and more divorced from reality in the sense that we are losing dependence upon ourselves and creating dependence on external sources. Now the master is an embodiment of a person who totally depends upon himself, which means the self in him. Therefore he is able to do everything.
How was it with you when you came to your master? What was it what you're looking for? And how, I mean, you were not born as a master, so you must have had some training. Can you describe that?
No master is born. That is what we believe. You see, masters are made. Like, for instance, an artist. No artist is born as an artist. He becomes an artist, he becomes a potter, he becomes a beer brewer, whatever it is. So here also somebody becomes by virtue of a practice to which he becomes totally dedicated, to which he gives his, shall we say, life itself. Because the highest things cannot be obtained in any field without putting your life as a possible sacrifice. When Michelangelo, mounted the platforms he made to paint the Sistine Chapel, he was putting his life at risk. The paints were rotten, they were creating disease, he developed so many diseases, he could have fallen and broken his neck. And in fact, they say his head became a permanent crick like this after he spent 3.5 years or something like that painting the chapel. Why? Because his head was always in this position. So it became fixed. No, if he was thinking of his elegance and the need to keep a straight neck and all this blah blah of the ballet, come like the guru, you see. There's no difficulty.
And this can happen also today with your disciples like me or anyone else?
Not only can happen again, it must happen again. It must happen again and again. Because if it stops, the whole thing collapses. You see. It's like a family having children and the children having their children and that children having their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. It must go on, you see. Such a family becomes a dynasty almost. If it stops, then you see today you have this tragedy in Europe that there are many people who have no children. So what happens to those families? They are dead. In 100 years, what will happen? All people who are afraid to have children or who are selfish enough not to have children but only to look to their own satisfaction, pleasure, success, comfort, standards of living, they are dooming their families to extinction. We cannot have that happen in a spiritual family, in a spiritual dynasty.
So spirituality and family life or everyday life do go together well.
In Sahaj Marg, we say they must go together because a family is a natural thing. It is natural to marry. It is natural to have children. It is natural to look after them, to love them. So my master said, or his master, Lalaji Maharaj said, that only in the family we learn two things which are of absolute importance in spiritual welfare: love and sacrifice. Now I would say love and sacrifice are the same thing, because where there is no love, there can be no sacrifice. And where there is sacrifice, it shows that there is love behind it. Only in a family life, the husband is sick when his wife is sick. She may be physically sick, his heart is sick to see her suffering. When his children suffer, they suffer, both of them. But in modern life, you suffer with nobody. I mean, an affluent Occidental person, he doesn't suffer for anybody except for himself. So you see here a totally developed narcissistic complex about which psychology speaks so much. In that sense, a wealthy, affluent Occidental has a narcissistic complex. He suffers for nobody except himself. He thinks of nobody but himself or herself. So it is a self-centered life. It is an involved life, involved with one's own self with a small s. In spiritual life also people can say, but you are also involved with yourself. Yes, but we are involved with the higher self, the capital S. It's a big distinction.